Hey everybody. I have to talk because there's an idea for a video that I have not really. I've just been way too busy to upload stuff much. I still have to do part 2 of BLM, which is, you got some real interesting stuff if you haven't heard. But ultimately, I was thinking about atheists. Yeah, I know, surprise, right? Why would I be thinking about atheists? But I'm thinking about atheists because something about them has always bothered me. And that is essentially the point that, let me explain. I was watching a debate between Cosmic Skeptic and some Muslim apologist. I'll tell you right now, I'll side with Cosmic Skeptic over a Muslim any day. But the Muslim apologist brought up a good point that I think I've known for a long time. I just was never sure how to word it. He said, I was at an atheist conference where they were talking about humanism and, wanting to help people, wanting to do good for humanity. And yet, despite that, I did not hear one word about China's treatment of its Muslims in its camps. The most awful violation of civil rights and human rights in the planet today, in modern age, was not brought up once. And why do I like that? I like it because it really personified and put into words what I really think about people like Matt Dillahunty, On Ra, Holy Kool-Aid, Thomas, I don't even remember his real name. But it just seems that they don't do anything. All they do is sit around talking about how bad God is, and they're like that one episode of SpongeBob. We saved everybody! And, the city's burning in the background. Essentially, you ever see the episode of South Park where Cartman's lying in bed and he's having a nightmare? Hippies, they claim they help, but all they want to do is complain all day. That's kind of how I feel about atheists. They're kind of like feminists in my eyes. It's like, what do you people do besides complain all day? It's like, again, that one episode of South Park where reality comes out and he's like, congratulations, you raised $1 million for homeless people by spending $2 million on filet mignon. And ultimately, one of the things that I don't think I knew it at the time, but I think I sort of knew it at the time, that drove me away from atheism, is that atheists just don't do anything. They complain all day. I watch some of these guys. I watch the Atheist Republic. I watch the Atheist Experience. I'm like, you guys must be fun at parties. And it just really bothers me that people who sit there and claim that they're humanists, that they want to help people, apparently their entire idea of helping people is, well, let's just complain about God and, maybe we'll do something right. Now, I am aware that, if you ask an atheist, well, what's your biggest accomplishment? Oh, well, we got evolution taught in schools. We overrided this Christian thing. We got this Christian statue removed. And, it just seems so unimpressive for people who claim that their greatest goal and what they truly believe in is to help people, to be humanists, to do what's best for humanity. Because, it's really funny. Those Muslim apologist words, they stuck with me. You may tell because I'm making this video. Now, atheists, they're always talking about God, which is pretty weird considering the fact that they all don't believe he exists. And I know they don't believe he exists, but they believe that the idea of him or the belief of him can lead others to do bad things, and that's why they do it. But ultimately, it just seems like you could do so much better if you actually focus more on the humanitarian part of your work. And I sat there, and as I'm thinking of this, I was reminded of a quote by Ravi Zachariah. He was responding to Richard Dawkins, who was, of course, running off of the mouth, God is an evil, genocidal, murdering rapist, blah, blah, blah. And someone asked him, so what do you think about that quote? And Ravi Zachariah responded, God rest his soul, he said, I think it's very interesting that Richard Dawkins would say that God is a man-made concept, but then turn around and tell us that we can have faith in and try to support the very species that brought that God into existence. I'm like, that's a really good point. Because if God's not real, where did he come from? He came from the mind of humans. From the minds of humans. It wasn't God who was the one responsible for all that. It's the humans that were. And I have to say, I think I've had an epiphany. I think I finally realized that the reason that atheists don't talk about what humanity does wrong, the reason they didn't bring up how China's treating its Muslim populations, the reason they don't bring much of any of that up, the reason they always much more prefer, well, why didn't God stop it? Why didn't God do something about it? I think the answer is obvious to that one. If you're an atheist, he doesn't exist. But I think the reason they don't do that is because it's a conflict of interest. Think about it. What is the atheist's entire approach? We don't need any God. Humanity is good enough without a God. We can strive. We can overcome things. We can do it. But think of it. That message is pretty hard to get across if you're constantly talking about how bad humanity is. It's like, and somebody summed it up to me in a quote. And I'm going to have to alter it because, again, my girlfriend won't let me swear. But they said, you have God and you have humanity. Now pick whose sucker you want to be. That's a brutally honest point. Either you're bowing before God, or you're bowing before the creatures that created the God. And that ultimately is why atheists, despite the wonderful bragging about humanitarian works, they don't talk much about what's actually going on in the world and how people can actually stop. And if they do, they're constantly dragging it back to, well, it's religion's fault, it's religion's fault. We need to have faith in our fellow human being. But religion wouldn't exist without your fellow human being. Your fellow human beings are the reason that religion exists. Ultimately, it's a catch-22 situation. Either we are humanity's sucker or we are God's sucker. And it's just a very brutally honest point. Now, due to COVID-19, my book is still not hard printed yet. It hasn't been printed. It hasn't been published. It was called The Art of Debating, in which I gave some really good tips out for debating. And I think I'm going to have to make I'm going to write another book, and it's going to be called The Case Against Humanity and Its Dire Need for a Savior. Because I'm a Christian first, but I'm also a historian. And when you look at some of the horrible, awful, brutal things that humanity has done, immediately the atheists will go, well, why didn't God stop that? God could have done something about it. Okay, genius, but according to you, he doesn't exist, so why even bother? It's like when I go talk to a Muslim and a Muslim's complaining about how China's treatment of camps, I never looked at that Muslim and said, well, why doesn't Allah do something about it? Because Allah doesn't exist. Genius. I'm much more concerned in helping the Muslims to get out of that scenario. But for some reason, atheist humanitarian work seems to involve, constantly dragging the shift away from humanity and onto God, which, according to them, was created by humanity. It's like, you can certainly see why atheist charity work is nothing compared to Christianity charity work. If they all did something more than just sit around and complain all day, and try to shift the blame onto the imaginary creature they don't believe in, they could do more. But either way, I'm ranting now. I gotta go. I'll see you around. I'll probably make a follow-up video. See you in the next video, whenever that may be.